So just a brief introduction to the types of research, and this is, the 10,000 mile view kind of idea, looking down at the Earth. So we've got quantitative research, which usually is referred to as empirical in some way, shape, or form. That is, you're specifically looking for confirmation of ideas, or to do the opposite, to actually cross off the list. But you're specifically looking at numerical or quantitative kind of data. The properties of materials are given in a numerical kind of format. And then you, of course, ask your question, you collect the data, and then you analyze the data using statistical methods. I would suggest that probably to do a quantitative kind of study is very, very difficult, because you need to know the things about the statistic methodologies and what it is that you're trying to look for, et cetera. And you need to have sufficient evidence to be able to make the claims that you're going to make. Quantitative is not as simple as it is purported to be by a lot of people. Keeping in mind that you can make statistics talk in any way that you really want, but to make it talk in a way that is reliable, and I'll be talking about that kind of terminology in a little bit, is very, very difficult. We're looking primarily then at either qualitative research or mixed methods, at least in the study of education. And qualitative research talks about naturalized methods or empirical methods that are used to investigate human behavior. And in education, that's almost always what we're interested in doing. So we're looking at why people do the things that they do. And you do that by collecting words, pictures, video, products that they are creating, all that kind of stuff, or looking at the process while they are creating it. And you analyze that data, looking for relationships that exist between the concepts that are presented. Now, here's the difficult piece. If you can't use the statistical test to tell you whether something is correlated or that it's related in some more specific way, then how are you going to do the same kinds of things to words and pictures and to video? Well, there's the nature of the beast in terms of trying to figure out what things mean in a qualitative kind of sense. And then we get to mixed methods, which is the most common, or at least in my neck of the woods, it's the most common methodology that you will be seeing used in the use of, or in the study of digital technologies in an educational context. So it's using both quantitative and qualitative, and I can give you some good examples of that if you're interested in taking a look at those kinds of pieces. Moving on. Sure, 2:15 works. We'll see what we can do to get there. At least if I stop talking then. Either that or I'm going to have to go faster. So the general processes, and this is very broad, so the 10,000 mile kind of view, or kilometer, whichever way you want. I guess miles is a little bit further out. So we're taking a look at the identification of a research problem. You do some kind of literature review. You specify the purpose of the research. You determine the specific research questions or hypotheses. You collect some data that will provide evidence to those or against your hypotheses or questions. You analyze and interpret the data, and you report evaluating the research. So those basically become the processes that we're actually going to be involved in. The one piece that I didn't put in the literature review section is a theoretical framework, but we certainly will talk about that as we move forward. Trustworthiness. Now, this is an interesting idea. Trustworthiness is made up of a number of different concepts, and credibility or plausibility is the first one. So that's the idea that each claim that is made is based on data from at least two different sources, ensuring the criterion of triangulation. So what you're doing is saying that from these two different sources, I'm seeing the same kinds of findings. You are seeing the same kinds of results, or they can be interpreted in exactly the same way. What would be even better is if you had another person who's doing the testing of the actual data itself, and you're finding that they are seeing exactly the same thing that you are, so that there is a correlation between the individuals who are doing the rating. It's called inter-rater reliability. So they're seeing the same kinds of information at the same time. Transferability, that's the extent to which decisions apply to other related situations. That is the generalizability of your actual results themselves. So can they be only limited, or can your results be limited only to the study that you were actually dealing with? And then you're probably looking at a case study or a pilot or something really, really small. So the generalizability is not very broad at all. Or are you looking at something that not only applies to your particular group, but it also could apply to the classroom next door or the classroom that's on the other side of the world? At which point, the standards that are required in a generalizable piece is much, much higher than one that doesn't have much generalizability or transferability. Dependability. Now, this is to the extent to which the study can be reproduced by somebody else. If it can be reproduced by somebody else, hey, that means that you've got something that we can actually count on. It's trustworthy, if you want. If it can't, well, there are good reasons why that might not be possible, but you've also got to be able to state those and talk about the limit to which the results are dependable. And then confirmability. Confirmability refers to the attempts to reduce, if not eliminate, bias. And here, there's no way to eliminate bias, but you're certainly going to try to reduce it, if not actually state what bias that you're actually going to be dealing with ahead of time. So when you're actually looking at the collection of your data, the analysis of your data, and bringing your findings and your conclusions to the foreground, keep all of these pieces in place. And in fact, plan to ensure that all of these pieces are in place, and therefore your end result of your work is going to be much, much greater than if you didn't plan for it ahead of time. All right. Any questions about all of that? Nothing. Oh, I'm doing so well here. Yeah, the comment here has to do with Denzin's handbook, and you'll actually see it listed in the Blackboard version of the course. Denzin's work is kind of interesting in that he talks about different kinds of aspects or different ways of putting the research together. And I'm just going to reference some of his stuff very, very briefly. So we're particularly looking at a couple of tables that he's got listed on page 12 and page 13, where he talks about the researcher as a multicultural subject. So this could be dealing with the history and research traditions. So as you're going through your context or your introduction of your research, you might think about the history and research traditions in that particular area. You might also be taking a look at the conceptions of self, so the researchers themselves. What impact does the researcher, in the way that the researcher looks at themselves, does that have on the rest of the study? And for those of you who think that the researcher is totally divorced from the study, there ain't no such beast. It doesn't work as far as I'm concerned. You're always going to have an impact in terms of what's going on within the study itself. And the results will change depending upon who you are and what you're doing. There are things like positivism that you need to keep in mind, constructivism, feminism. There's a whole variety of different theoretical paradigms and perspectives that you need to take into account and use them as you're moving through a theoretical structure for your particular research project. There are research strategies. So You're looking at study design. Are you going to be using a case study? Are you using ethnography, participant observation, phenomenology, ethnomethodology, grounded theory, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? These are all traditions or ways of doing your particular research. And then we're talking about the methods of collection and analysis. So are you going to be using interviews? Are you using observations? Are you going to be using documents and records? Are you using visual methods? Are you using personal experience, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? What about the art of interpretation? And it is an art. So what are you going to be using there? So what criteria are you going to be using for judging adequacy? And what about the politics of interpretation? So if you find something that's going to have a huge impact on another group of individuals, how are you going to actually communicate that? Or are you going to communicate it? Because it might get you into trouble. And you can talk to Elizabeth about those kinds of things. She's got more experience than I do. I tend to be the bull in the china shop, but anyways. Policy analysis comes into this, evaluation traditions, applied research, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a wide variety of different kinds of theoretical aspects that you need to be aware of and working through. Yes, I can put the slides in Blackboard. There's not a problem with that.